I will say one of the things you said a couple minutes ago about Louisville and the big test of will they be able to beat guys off the dribble, go one-on-one against high major opponents and get buckets. Indiana's an interesting case for that because IU has struggled so much in the Woodson era and including their first couple games this year with, they they like to overhelp. They really like to overhelp, and they leave dudes wide open a lot because they get stuck in rotation so often. When a lot of times they really don't need to be stuck in rotation. To where I look at the way Louisville can move the ball and get open looks. If they're hitting shots, I feel like. Which I was stunned when I was looking at it earlier today. Indiana's actually, opponents are only shooting like 26% or something like that from three so far this year, which is, really, really good. But a lot of that is as we've talked about it ad nauseum in the past,
Hmm.
3 point percentage is blind luck. A lot of the times, it's more about the quality of looks you give up more than if they actually make them or not. But the way Indiana defends, I think it sets up well for Louisville to be able to get some open shots. And if they're able to have a guy like Cason Pryor, I think is going to be such a big key because he's top 10 nationally in drawing fouls right now.
Hmm.
And we've seen him not as much in the Tennessee game. I think he tried to do it, but was kind of, to be completely honest, got shut down a little bit by what Tennessee was able to do defensively. I don't know if Indiana is going to be able to do the same type of thing, but Malik Renew's a guy that's really struggled with foul trouble throughout his career. If Jason Pryor is able to get downhill a little bit, draw a couple fouls on him, that could take away some of the perceived really big advantage Indiana has on the other end of the floor. But I just looked so much at the ball movement. Now I say if they're able to move the ball, crisp, if if they're able to get into that rhythm offensively, I think the way Indiana defends on the back end and how they struggle to rotate and overhelp a lot of times can bode very well for Louisville in this game.
Yeah, and look, against Tennessee, it became stagnant because look, the first set they had was some false action and a quick dribble handoff. Louisville loves to run slips on their pick and rolls and then into Spain actions where they're setting back screens. They do that a lot. Did it last night, and it's hard action to guard. You get right into a screen, a false cut, a dribble handoff, right into a ball screen, and then a Spain action, and that's hard to guard. And even on the first possession against Tennessee, Hadley kind of lifted up. If he stays in the corner, Chucky Hepburn has him in that spot. So I think against Indiana, that's something that you're going to see. You're going to put those bigs in a lot of having to guard two actions, having to guard a handoff right into a ball screen, having to guard a Spain, which is just a back screen, and exchange and talk on that stuff. And then you're going to get where bigs switch out, and that's when guards can create. And you talked about the overhelp. They see a big on a guard. That's when you overhelp, and that creates, because of the spacing Louisville does a very good job of. Now you're going to be in a position where you can make shots or drive closeouts. So I think that's what Louisville's going to really try and do: attack their bigs in a lot of those ball screens and slips, back screens, and so on.
Yeah, which Indiana will switch a lot. Typically 1 through 4, especially they will not switch if Umar Ballo. He will play drop coverage and pretty consistently play drop coverage. He's hedged because Indiana's played 3 games so far. I've seen him hedge a couple times, and he actually
Mm-hmm.
did it better than what I thought that he was capable of doing, to his credit. So maybe you'll see that thrown in every once in a while, but I do think you'll get a lot of drop coverage when you put Umar Ballo in the screen
Yeah.
game. Yeah.
And the way to attack him is a lot of roll and replaces, because then you have, whether it's a Waterman and you have a Scott roll and you have a Pryor or Waterman lift, or even a 4-man lift where he's going to have to plug and take that guy. And it's late sometimes on the switch outs where, yeah, he's going to stay in that drop, but sometimes whoever's guarding the roller might just take that half misstep. And now you have a lift by a big, and whether it's a pick and pop or a roll and replace, Louisville's going to try and attack them and have their bigs with their spacing and have a Pryor, a Waterman, those type of guys come up and look for 3-point shots. I mean, that's the way to attack teams that do a lot of drop coverages.
Yeah, which I'll say, I honestly think this game's going to come down to one thing because I think Louisville's going to be able to get good looks from three on a lot of the things we've talked about. I think Indiana's going to have that big advantage in the paint on the other end, but a lot of this is going to come down to something that I'm sure Pat Kelsey and his team's been working on since the Tennessee game, and something that what Indiana's been good under Mike Woodson. I think they did a really good job of this in the South Carolina game, who they beat by 16, which South Carolina's not a great win, but it's a power conference team, so
Mm-hmm.
it's something at least. I'll put it that way. And even in the Tennessee exhibition that they played in Knoxville, back in October, when Mike Woodson's teams are successful defensively, they do a really good job of pressuring the ball in the half court and pushing the offense out.
Mm-hmm.
That's where Indiana has their success defensively. Look where Louisville struggled in that Tennessee game. It was they couldn't handle the physicality of Zakai Ziegler and Meshack and all the length, the size, and athleticism Tennessee had. So to me, if Louisville's able to get to the spots they want to offensively, that's where everything else we've already talked about absolutely applies. I think Louisville's going to get great shots and be able to score at a very high rate. But if they struggle with Indiana's guards, or Caden Carlisle is
Well,
really good on ball defender. Miles Rice has shown some potential there. Galloway's a guy also. That's where it's like, okay, to me that's where a lot of the game will come down to is can Louisville initiate offense the way it wants to, or will Indiana be able to push them out farther on the perimeter?
well, the counter to that is what Tennessee did a really good job is pushing their bigs out. And I don't know if Indiana's bigs are going to do
No, they
that. The
will not.
pressure, so the pressure release,
Yeah.
playing through the bigs and playing through a high post release and pressure release and then into zooms and then the dribble
Yeah.
handoffs. I mean, that's the way to attack teams that are in drop. And those are ways because the bigs for Louisville are really proficient at that. When you're talking about Case and Pryor, Scott, and Waterman, they're really good at that type of action because, again, they can pressure release, which means just flash to the basketball, catch it, go right into a dribble handoff, and pick and pop, or
Yeah.
go right into a zoom with a back cut and create, and then a quick roll, and then the biggest showing for half a second, and you have a little pocket pass. So there's what Tennessee did a really good job of is making those passes difficult. They were contesting every pass, every cut, every dribble. You talked about Indiana's guards doing that. If it's not connected, you can have the guards pressuring, but if the bigs are pressure releasing and you can just throw it to them and play off of that. And a lot of times, like I said earlier in the show, the passer's dangerous. So once he
Yeah.
makes that pass, he can cut, and you have to help off of that. That opens up shots for the big. So that's going to be the chess match that you're going to see in this game, which will be interesting. I think what you're going to see a lot of, Jack, is them playing through the bigs, not expecting the guards to do over dribbling or create a lot of their own. I think it'll be playing through the bigs with pressure release, dribble handoffs, roll and replaces, pick and pops. I think that's what you'll see a lot more of than relying on the guards to have to really just create their own. I think it's going to be where you have effective bigs, and that also includes Terrence Edwards to be in those spots. So you have a lot of guys who have multiple skill sets from the bigs who can pass it and shoot it. So I think that's where Louisville's really going to attack Indiana.
Yeah, I will say Umar Ballo to me is the big question because we know he's going to play drop coverage. He's not going to high hedge a lot. Renew and when they go small, which Indiana's done more to their credit than I thought they were going to this year so far. When they're playing Mbako or a guy like Bryson Tucker or Luke Goody at the four, I think they can pressure a little bit more, but I just don't think Indiana's going to want to take Ballo so far away from the basket.
Mm-hmm.
Which that's part of the issue when you play Louisville is because they have so many guys that can shoot the ball. And even a guy like James Scott, as you said, can lift up and play really well in that dribble handoff motion and that zoom action to where I think that's going to be the big question mark is can Indiana or how does Louisville attack Umar Ballo? Can Indiana mask that deficiency? Because if you got to take Umar Ballo off the floor, that's fine, but that's where you lose a lot of the rebounding edge that you expect Indiana to
Of
have in this
course.
game. And if you do that, that to me is also advantage Louisville to where
Mm-hmm.
Indiana's playing smaller. And yeah, Malik Renew is still going to be a big problem trying to guard him in the most, but you're not having to defend that as much as what you think you were going to have to do.
No, absolutely. So, you don't want to just take off your better players because of a way a team's attacking it. And then what you have to do is figure out a way to attack them on the defensive end as well and put him into actions that's going to be tough for Louisville to guard. But it's never easy. And
Right.
guarding at the collegiate level, you're never taking everything away. You're not going to have a shutout. But what you have to do is find a way schematically that we're going to attack them. And that's what really goes into scouting. People think it's just, okay, we know their plays, we're taking this away. No, you are just systematically diving in and you're just watching just play after play after play about how can we attack them. And that goes back to what we talked about earlier. You watch some of the Bellarmine film saying, all right, this is how Bellarmine attacked Louisville. We might just put in a wrinkle here or there, and we're looking at ways that Louisville's susceptible. And that's what you're doing with everything. You're doing that against Indiana. You talked about Bella with the drop coverages. Okay, let's get our bigs into a lot of high post action because that's going to be hard for Indiana to guard.
Which I think where Indiana's going to test Louisville on the other end. You talked about all the action, the diagonals that Bellarmine did. I think they're looking at that Tennessee film, especially, and saying, okay, we're going to put Miles Rice and Trey Galloway in a lot of ball screens with
Mm-hmm.
either Ballo or Renew, and we're going to see how Louisville can defend those because that's one playing to Indiana's strength because Miles Rice and Galloway are very good at that, and
Yes.
two using the size advantage of Ballo and Renew and trying to get into the paint, which we know Indiana's going to want to get into the paint a bunch in that game.
Yeah, I think Louisville needs to clean up their ball screen defense, and I never say coverage because the three guys outside of it, it's not just the two guys involved because that's what happened a lot. The tags were late. They weren't taking two steps towards the ball screens, and again, Louisville was susceptible. Tennessee ran six floppy actions, and all that was something that was troublesome for Louisville as well. And it wasn't just the floppies. There's pin downs, having the big show out. That's something that you're going to look at from Indiana as well. And what that does too, you can set those pin downs and race into a flat ball screen. So there's different ways to get into those actions, which I'm sure Indiana is going to look at and say, okay, here's ways we're going to attack Louisville.
Yeah, which Indiana does run a lot of floppy for Mackenzie and Baco, especially in that Tennessee exhibition. They did
Mm-hmm.
that. They'll run that for Luke Goody some as well. They haven't pulled it out too much this year. I wonder if Woodson's saving it, but Trey Galloway's really good in zoom action. To where I could see them. They ran it a lot last year with Renew or Khalil Ware at the high post to where, or even posted up to where they would kind of run Galloway off a bunch of screens on the baseline, then
Mm-hmm.
have him kind of curl, usually off the left block and kind of, either get a little floater or dump off, kick it out for a three, that type of thing, to where I think they might utilize that a little bit more. But I'm interested. How would you try? Yeah, because we've seen. I think the South Carolina is a good example for this because South Carolina played a lot of drop coverage early. Indiana had success against it. They started blitzing screens early in the second half. They struggled a little bit, but then they found a little bit of an adjustment to where they had Malik Renew's short roll. They had, Tucker and Ibaka kind of cut from the corners off of the short roll to kind of create a little bit of a 3-on-2 advantage. How do you expect Louisville to try to defend that pick and roll and just kind of, try to keep Indiana out of the paint
Yeah,
as
they've
best
shown.
as they can?
Well, that's the thing, and they've shown it's really. And I'll tell you this, Jack. It's how good you actually guard, and you could whatever coverages you are when you switch, making sure you get into the inside, showing out, making the dribble go east and west. Louisville has shown a propensity to do a lot of switching, and then you're seeing Case and Pryor blitz out and trap. He's been the guy, him and Scott, where everybody else has been almost in switching actions. You haven't seen a lot of drops. You've seen that, but I think what they're going to do, it really is, you want to force on any type of ball screen, you really want to take away that corner pass and you want to take a roll, whether it's a short roll, get an arm across and a tag. You want to force skips and fades against that because that gives you time. You can't determine who, but how that pass is going to be made. And if you're in a blitz or a switch, you have high hands. And no matter what, that pass has to be skipped. And that gives you a time to recover. That buys half a second for your defense. So I don't think Louisville's going to do anything exotic. I think they're going to stay with what they've been doing, which is switching and blitzing. It's just cleaning up and having the guys outside of that, the two guys involved in the ball screen, just being in two places at once, more activity, higher hands, tagging that roll, whether it's a short roll, having an arm across to take that away and force a skip or fade, not letting yourself get pinned in. I just think it's just being better at it. And it sounds simplistic, but it really is. You watch them just being late on certain actions, cleaning those things up. You didn't see it against Bellarmine, but I'm sure that's what they've been doing a lot of in practice.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm interested to see in the Winthrop game. If Winthrop's going to run a little bit more ball screen action, which
Right.
compared to Bellarmine, they will, because everyone runs more ball screen offense compared to Bellarmine. That's just not what they do. And they've had a lot of success for a lot of years not running those ball screens, but to see if Louisville's able to do that. But then Indiana will obviously be a much bigger step in
Mm-hmm.
that as well with those guards. I'm very excited to see Chucky Hepburn and Miles Rice go at each other because, Chucky is I don't know if you know this. He's third in the nation in steal percentage, which is very, very, very elite. There's no other way to get around it. He's always had he's always been a pest on the defensive end. He's had that reputation, but I feel like he's really kind of taken it another level so far here at Louisville to where I'm very excited to see him and Miles Rice, who is uber talented and really, to be quite honest, got the best of Zakai Ziegler in the exhibition game in
Yep.
Knoxville in October, to where I'm very, very, very excited to see those two guys go at it and see who's able to kind of get the upper hand on that one.
I watched some of it, but I want to rewatch the scrimmage against Tennessee, the exhibition
It's
against
a good
Tennessee.
watch. I mean,
Yeah.
that game, the South Carolina game, are the only two teams with a pulse Indiana's played so far. But the Tennessee game's really interesting because
Hmm.
Indiana doesn't run a whole lot in that game. They tried a lot of post ups early. They got a lot of stuff in transition, but a lot of it was just giving the ball to Miles Rice and say,
Sure.
pick and roll. Beat your guy and
Hmm.
get by Guy Ziegler on a pick and roll. But or they did run a lot of floppy action in that game too. They got some good shots, but South Carolina, we talk about it so much with Indiana in the paint, or at least I talk about this a Louisville podcast, but but no, trying to post ups and playing through the post. They only had 12 post ups in 79 possessions against South Carolina, which is a very low number for Indiana. That's somewhere like the 10-12% range, where traditionally under Woodson they've been somewhere like 20-22%, which is one of the higher marks in the country, to where they still obviously will go to that, but I think they've shown that they'll play smaller more often, and they play a little bit more modern, which for the Indiana side of things is encouraging, but also they're not going to just straight post up as much. Of course, they might just see the Louisville matchup and say we're going to play bully ball. They could absolutely be doing that as well, trying to take advantage of the size advantage they'll have down there.
Yeah, Louisville has shown they've been firing. I mean, just doubling down on the post. They did that in the Bahamas. They did that even against Bellarmine.
Yeah.
They'll counter that with trying to trap that post. If it becomes where Indiana's just trying to throw it in and just play 4 round one and just go high low and whatnot.
Yeah, which
I think
they will go high low too, out of the post as
yeah,
well.
and again, trying to keep it out of, and that's the difficult part because you can't really double from that angle, but trying to get it, just forcing the guy 3 inches away from his sweet spot and doubling that because and just firing down quickly. That's what Louisville's shown somewhat, and I think they'll be prepared for that as well.
Yeah, which that becomes can Louisville rotate well because Renew is a very willing passer. He's a good passer for a
Mm-hmm.
big guy. They don't have anyone like Trace Jackson Davis a couple years ago was phenomenal passing the ball on the post. They don't have anyone to
Yeah.
that level, but both he and Ball have shown that they're proven passers out of the post too. So Louisville rotating on that end. If you haven't been able to figure it out yet, this is more than just me following Louisville and Indiana more than I follow any other program in the country. I am absolutely fascinated by this game. I have been for a very long
Oh, I know you are. I know
time
this
to
is
where
yes.
it's such a yin and yang for me of how the two teams want to play, how they want, Indiana wants to get in the paint, they want to dominate the boards. Louisville wants to, stretch you out. They're going to play 5 out. I do think it's going to be a very visually pleasing game to watch. Both teams want to get up and down. They're going to play fast. There's going to be a lot of possessions. I'm not really sure who that's going to favor or benefit at this stage, but I do think it's going to be a fun game to watch in that sample. I want to ask you this on the rebounding side. Other than Case and Pryor, I do think Abubakar Traore is probably Louisville's best rebounder so far, or at least I think I'll rephrase that, most proven rebounder from his time before coming to Louisville. Not having him, while my questions with him were always more like, okay, how does he impact the floor spacing offensively? He's not really
Mm-hmm.
a threat to shoot. He's only 6'5" or whatever, but he's an absolutely monster on the glass. Really, really good at putting ball pressure on guys. Can guard multiple positions. I think this is, I mean, obviously Louisville's going to be without Corin Johnson as well, but
Mm-hmm.
I think Traore is going to be a piece that they're really going to miss in this game. They could really use his size and or not as much size, but his physicality and just, rebounding up.
Yeah, I think so. I think Corin Johnson's is a big miss too. I
Yep,
really
secondary
do.
ball handler for sure.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's probably going to hurt a little bit more because the rebounding part, you can get some gang rebounding. You have enough guys who are willing to do it. You just have a guy who's really active. I mean, Hadley's length and Edwards, those guys can mix it up, and they're a real physical when they're focused and what I had seen in practices, what I'd seen leading up to the Tennessee game was that, and I think they'll get back to being a very physical defensive rebounding team. But not having Corin is something where okay, now we have another guy who's just active and can create because you're asking a lot of Chucky Hepburn defensively, and then to get him into those actions. That's why it's going to be gang rebounding. I'm sure that's going to be a point of emphasis with this team. It's going to be getting tip outs and going after it. The biggest thing on the offensive end, and I've talked about that before, is anticipating and knowing where your shots are coming from. Against Tennessee, that was stagnant and it was a dribble or one pass and a shot. That doesn't give you a chance to, when you reverse the basketball and you're patient with those type of things, you make the defense slides, you make them close out. They're not in a great position to get a defensive rebound. That gives you the advantage. And on the offensive end, is making sure that you're just limiting them to one shot and done. You don't want to give second shots to Indiana, and that's going to be a key thing. Troy, look, he's a physical guy. It's just that's part of the game. You're gonna have to make up for it. Corin, that's unfortunate because that would take some pressure off of Chucky,
Yeah.
and I think they would got to the point where those guys are on the floor together quite a
Which
bit.
I guess technically he could play because it was just kind of diagnosed as shoulder injury. I haven't seen anything about a timetable on that. That's just more of like, and I'm not trying to break any news on that
No,
point
no,
saying he wasn't gonna play, but I'm
no,
just
and I
yeah.
wasn't either. You just when the guy's out, it's almost like you're not as a coach. You're just okay. You're almost a pessimist sometimes with that. You try and be encouraged, and we'll see. Maybe he's out there against Winthrop, and that'd be fantastic, and we'll see. But it also shows you again what we had talked about last week is how physical things must have been
Oh yeah.
inside the practice facility and inside the keeper center. That must have been they must have got after it pretty good.
Yeah.